Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Laser Sports Academy podcast. It gives me great pleasure to have a special guest on today, a very old friend that I've known since the dawn of time, since most of our viewers probably weren't even born yet, since we've been playing laser tag together. But we have a WA player and administration veteran, winner of the 2008 Zeltac Australasian Championships with the Combat Wombats, and also the only female to ever captain a winning nationals team. And Australian representative on the World's Council and many time member of the Zeltac Committee, SimmyBear Bell. How you going, mate?
Good, mate. How you doing?
Very well.
Geez, we've known each other since 1995. There you go, kiddies. Wrap your head around that one.
There you go. I know. I can't even count back that far, but yeah, that's when we started hanging outside the front of Zone 3 Northbridge with our knee pads on, sweating it up in the middle of summer and playing one-handed laser tag.
And knee sliding around the joint.
Yeah, exactly. At 4 shots a second. It was quite fun, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, so we came from humble beginnings, and but we've progressed to all new heights in laser tag, haven't we, mate? And you guys, I hear, ran your selection comp for the coming nationals on the weekend. How did all that go?
Yeah, so we had qualifying tournament number 1, 2 more to go, but yeah, number 1, which was fantastic. We did stream the event. We've unfortunately not got the video, but that's okay. We'll be streaming the next 2. But we had a great time. It was fantastic. There was a bit of, for some of the other teams, this is their first time going through that intense performance comp situation. So there are a few new players feeling overwhelmed, and I think one of the proudest moments is looking out on the foyer because we built in some gaps because we only have 4 teams, and really watching the players like Flash and Drake and that mingling with the other teams and doing all that fun stuff and helping them out and all of those stuff, and then all of us just having a great time. It was pretty intense. At the moment, the ladder is pretty well laid out and there's a nice big gap, so we've got 2 more to go. So I'm trying to think. Orcas are in first, Quackening are in second. Team 4, who yet to have a name, in third, and Paradox is in 4th at the moment. So it's all interesting times and exciting times, and it's very different trying to emulate on the Laser Force equipment, but we do our best.
So for those of us at home that aren't fully aware of how the selections happen, this is selections for the Zeltac for the West Australian teams. You guys get 3 spots this year?
We've got 3 spots, so 2 of those spots will only be awarded from this competition. Our other part of that is we have a participation point or spot, that our community goal spot that Zeltac give us every year for doing all the righties, goes back to players so the points are collected for reffing at nationals, going to leagues, doing premier tournaments, which can be anything from our doubles tournaments to our training. So we get points for participation at training, and they're all weighted on importance. You also get points for being a new player. And there are some volunteer points in there as well. So all of those are basically we combine them all up, and then when the teams are formed, we get the average of what your participation points are based on how many players on your team. And so the team with the biggest average gets that next slot after we've handed out all the performance slots. So it's our way of, that's our development spot. It's a way that everyone can earn it. It's what you put in is what you get out. So
yeah. I think it's great that you guys are rewarding the people that are putting into the community, because it doesn't run itself.
No.
The community requires lots of people to contribute time and energy to keep it running. So to engineer a way to reward that with a spot at nationals with the way that you're measuring everything and stuff, I think it's a really good approach. And one of the reasons I was so excited about talking to you today is because not everybody would know that WA were probably, you would consider, the first kind of legacy state, you would say, for the Australasian Championships. So Hobart kind of had the early success. They had the first team to go back to back. So they won at home in 2003. And then in 2004, they were the first team to win away from home. which was a huge feather in the cap for our good friend Billy. But that year, there was a whole bunch of new Northbridge players that started up. That included a bunch of eventual champions, which you're going to tell us all about soon. But from 2004 through to 2013, WA really kind of dominated in many respects at the national level. And yeah, you were there through the whole thing, and you saw it. So yeah, just for the guests at home that might not know the full story, just give us a bit of background about that period of time, and what kind of successes the WA scene had at that time.
All right, so just going to bring up, I was going to say we had so much. We had the most teams at a nationals. Werribee and Darwin, we had 7 teams turn up, so 45 player contingents. And that was quite normal. We would really range between that, but in the earlier years, that was a lot of people that we used to
Well,
do.
we're talking about an era when there was only 20 odd teams going to a nationals. I think Werribee we got 30 for the first
31.
time. 31,
31.
yeah, and you guys were getting 7, 8 teams when there was only kind of 22 to 24 teams going nationals.
Yeah, I was going to say one of
Yeah,
our
so,
most successful years was probably Darwin. That wasn't home for us, which we ended up placing wise, a team in second, a team in fifth, a team in sixth, and a team in eighth, which was huge, absolutely huge. And that came off the back of a really tough year and a development year, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, from '04, like we've just got so many successes. Like I've got so many amazing players I played with over the years in WA. It's really hard to keep my head straight on who they all are. But I've got some interesting facts here for everyone that they didn't know, and probably one of my favourite players that I love to debate with and love to disagree with was Slimy. Um, he was one of a kind, and from '04 to 2013, Slimy never missed a doubles finals. No one else has done that, so that's 10 years. Never missed a finals. He retired in 2013. It's probably the only reason that stopped.
so when he retired, he had never missed a doubles finals
Correct.
in his life. Oh wow!
Yeah.
And also for those at home, he won the 2004 solos.
Hmm.
His team got second, but they also almost were hospitalised with sickness during the final. So they did have a bit of a struggle in the final. Came back 2005. Was so unlucky not to make the final in 2005. They were clearly the second best team the whole comp, and then just had one bad game. And we were trialing a new final system that year, and
That's right.
the person who created the final system was on the team with Slimy and Chunky, and they were the only team that could potentially get knocked out at an early stage because of where they finished, which was second, and they actually did. They got knocked out early after one bad game. And then they came back in 2006 and again were right up there again. And then in 2007 they finally broke through for their first win. But I'm sure there's like dozens of little stats about things that you guys achieved during that time. Because I can remember at the time I used to be so jealous. I used to come up to Slimy at nationals and be like, "I want the think tank. I want to be hanging out with you guys." I could just see how much how far advanced they were than the rest of us in terms of the number of players they had on their team who understood strategy and team dynamics and things like that. Because we're talking about an era where really none of the teams had 5 top tier players on their team. Usually there was a mixture of 2 or 3 top tier players and a few at the next tier because we weren't quite as developed as we are now. So, but WA were one of those, the first teams that had like talent that went all the way through their list and also had that understanding of strategy at a deep level.
And I think that really comes down to the fact that we're very much a squad mentality. 2007, we all stayed together, end of nights, we'd strategize together. We really were a bonded unit, like nothing you've ever seen. Um, that made it, we were family. We partied together, we trained together, and we talked together. And we supported each other all the way through, and that was really important. That was really led by, very luckily for us back then, the Captain Oz and Doug's of the world. They had a lot of influence, which we'll get into a bit later. But yeah, that just kind of carried us and yeah, people were jealous because we all loved each other. We had don't get us wrong, we were definitely a family. We definitely argued. We had some bad years. I think a couple stand out where for WAG basically, 2011, we'll talk to 2011 for us. They had a really, really bad round robin, a really, really bad cascade. And they were really down on themselves, and the squad really rallied behind them. And everyone's sitting at tables with maps and talking them through things and going, we need to learn from the game and we all need to learn from each other. And it was this big rally moment behind them because they just really thought they were out of it. And then everyone is rallying, and you can imagine coming out in the foyer and you've got these 45 players, booming voices, just pumping you up, pumping you on, going, you guys have got this, you guys have got this, and them taking on all the ideas and stuff because they were out of them themselves. And there are some photos floating around on Facebook where you can see us all having those conversations with them. It wasn't, we didn't want to tear our top team down, we wanted to lift our top team up. It was very much about that. And that's a very great moment for us as a squad. Something we miss at the moment, but we'll work on it. We had all sorts of stuff like that. And then these accolades come on top of that. One person wins a trophy for WA. We had Damo, and Damo was one of the most successful players in Zeltac. He won 13 trophies out of 6 years. And he started as a kid. We all got to watch him grow up and get those. He also Grand Slammed. Slimy Grand Slammed. Psych. Again, I'm probably talking about the one team here, but they really were fundamental as our top team in getting us all together. Psych, blind in one eye, and ever only finished second, lower than second once in the 6 years he played in teams event. And that was with me, and I'm really sorry I blew his stats there, Psych.
Psych and Damo's results for how long they played were ridiculous. They'd still be up there in the highest number of average trophies or podiums per nationals, aren't they? They're on the top, I think.
Yeah. There. But as a squad, thanks to my lovely stats very orientated team, WA is one of the most successful states without having the system at home. So all of those
years. That's why I always consider Wank's achievements the highest, because they didn't get the three-peat, but they won 2 out of 4 and got 2 seconds, and they did it without the system at home. That is phenomenal. Nobody's done that.
No,
or probably will.
Yeah, so 4 Nexus Nats were won by 2 home teams and 2 WA teams. And we didn't even have the kit at home. We had nothing to practice on, so we had to become inventive. I think the ingenuity of our leadership group at the time was really interesting, how they managed to make us train without the equipment, and I think that's really important going into this year. I'm digging deep. I've got my old files and binders out going, what did we do? How did we adjust? How do we do our best to emulate something we hadn't even seen, because pre-Nats wasn't a thing really. None of us had seen a Nexus pack. We were going to wing it.
That's right. Pre-Nats started later than that.
So
when you get down to when you reflect on all that, because obviously you got a lot of good memories, but have you reflected on what were some of the key ingredients? Why did you guys have such good relationships, and what was it that bonded the group together in such a way?
What bonded us together was leadership from Wombat down. We very much were led by this mentality that what's good for one is good for everybody. We had, and at the early years, that was Wombat. Wombat gave us the core values. They were very core values of we're one, we're all. And so what was good for them, and Slimy, and Captain Oz was a great believer in the best way they could become great was to develop the rest of us. So we'd have leagues and that where Slimy and Chunky, so they come back from a Nats, and then for the next 6 months, they only played with new players. That was it. That's all you saw them do at our leagues. They would come back and they'd take all new players. They wouldn't play with each other. We didn't see a lot of that for most of the year. And Captain Oz's. And then when things were, if they thought the leagues were getting out of balance, Captain Oz would go, okay, let's grab a bunch of people for captaincies, we're going to stick them all in a room, and now we're going to pick some teams. Or we do the old grand almighty pick your pick your teams out of a hat and mix it up and make it fun. But on top of that, we were all friends. We hung out together. We did things together. We went bowling together. We had those moments, where we get together and talk and have civil conversations, so open conversations, and that was all very encouraged. When Wombat transitioned out was probably our hardest year, which was 2010. And Slimy did what we all called at the time. He broke nationals. I was supposed to have Damo and Psych on my team that year for 2010. Unknown fact. And we were all a bit angry. So Slimy kind of didn't mention it to anyone. He went and changed the Nats rules. And you can imagine he's got all these players up a bark because all of a sudden we're now no longer site owned. Because back then, don't forget, it was site. So you had to get applications to go across sites. Well, Willow, Psych and Damo were Willow. They were mine. Or Dorkies or Spins. And he kind of threw the cat amongst the pigeons. And though Captain Oz had retired, he came back to sit us all down in a room and go, grow up. And this is how we're going to sort it out. So then we had those conversations that we've been having for many years about our Nats teams. They're all done in the rooms with the captains. The captains were selected, and then we all sat in the room and developed those teams together. That's probably why you saw them very balanced for many, many years. So we rebalanced our teams for that year. The tension still grew, if that makes sense. It was still growing and it was still grumbling, and we weren't all getting along then. And then Snake did something. He'd had enough. We'd all had to organise our own stuff, our own shirts, but we had to do it all ourselves. Never done that. We've always had Big Daddy Wombat to do it for us, and we're arguing. Big Daddy Wombat's pulling you in a room and he's going, nah, or Captain Oz is. We went to our first Nats without them, so Snake stepped up and grabbed the senior leadership group. So he grabbed all the captains and all the players with influence over the rest. Pulled us into a car park and sat us down and went, enough's enough, so let's talk about this honestly. How we're all feeling, how we're making each other feel, and let's move past it, because we do not succeed right now as a squad unless we're all together and we're all supporting each other and we're doing all these things.
So the Legend Snake was brought the group all back together.
Yeah. So we had the car park, so many problems have been solved in a car park at laser tag. So we had this conversation, then we all got sent home to talk to our teams and just say enough's enough. This is what's happening, this is what we're going to do. And then Snake organised a big WA barbecue. And this is 7 teams worth of people. So it's not a small group he was trying to pull back together in such a short amount of time. And then he stood, and I just remember him standing there because we've got a big squad photo that we've lost somehow. He was standing there up on the second balcony and he gave a speech that really was, get along with each other, guys. This isn't about just yourself. And we had our barbecue, and then the famous shenanigans of 2010 happened between the WA teams. And they're real pinnacle moments. And we have many of those, like the 2011 story. And they don't always just centre around the Knights. I had injured myself in Darwin, and the Knights really wanted my team in the finals. We were so close, one more golden game to go, and we'd already blown the first one. So there is the Knights and the Raiders all standing around our team. We've got a photo of this one. And they're all trying to work out how to strap a gun to my hand, trying to work out our team strategy against Boom, and that to make and you guys to make the finals. And they're all standing around us and collectively trying to help us achieve. That was Raiders who have been knocked out, Revolution who have been knocked out, and it's just one big fam, trying to help us come up with something to get us over the line. And regardless of what happened, because Doug had given the team the speech going, so at some point today we're not going to be happy, but look what we've achieved. So when we came out and you guys beaten us into the grand final, those words rang true, because we had gone from a very dysfunctional, argumentative family who are at each other's throats to this moment in time. So I think we just remember the wank ones because they were ended in success, real big success for the state. if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, there's a couple of things that you spoke about that I'd love to dig into. Like, I think the first one is having those people that can turn the group around, like what you just explained with Jake. And I always credit, like, one of the reasons I think WA was so successful in the early days is because we had actually been playing league at a high level for a long time. By the time Nationals came around in 2001, when we first played, we'd already been having successful leagues of like, so 6, 7 years with like 8, 9, 10 teams a season. And so much of that was Wombat and his social skills,
Yes.
because there was always like going to Macca's after league. There was always parties. We had
The Kahuna
the parties at
parties.
Kimbo's place, the Kahuna parties. We had like they used to all be on IRC together, which is like before the internet, or at the beginnings of dawns of
Showing
time of
our age.
the internet relay chat, where they just all, yeah, they will chat to each other online. So that became a social thing as well. And Wombat was just like a master of yeah, like just bringing people together in that way. And because of that, we always had a lot of people at league. So by the time we got to playing at an interstate level, we'd already been playing comps for ages by that point. And yeah, we still hadn't like fully figured out like these bigger questions around, community culture and all that kind of stuff. But we'd been experiencing it the whole time, I guess. Yeah, so yeah, those players in your scene that can like identify when there's relationships that need like some work, or there's conversations that need to be had, and can just prompt the right conversations that are so critical, aren't they, to get everybody coming back together again if there's some kind of disagreement or rift within the
Yep.
community.
It's so
Yeah.
important. Wombat built a family. I know I look to Wombat as a second father, and Doug also, but he really built a family, you know, here, and I think that's important. That it, again, we're all in it together. One of us has a bad day, we're all going to rally. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And like, even like, I can remember thinking back to when things really turned around for us, because we were like knocking on the door behind WA for years and years and years, and it was always like, we always felt like we matched up quite well against Wank, but they always beat us in the biggest games. Like when the games that really counted, they always got us, and we learnt so much from them. And one of the things that happened that I think, well, a couple of things happened. We got Helios, that really helped. So we finally had the packs that were playing nationals on, but we got to a point where we actually had a critical mass of players to train against.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that WA had for ages as well, wasn't it? You guys had so many players. So I remember Willow. Like, how many teams did you guys have training against each other at
8,
Willow,
I think, for
leading
Willow.
8 teams?
Yep. I think we had.
And at one stage, you had like 8 in the top 10 or
Oh, that
something
was that
after
year.
round robin.
Yeah, that was a home nat, so we don't count that as much. We probably, for us, don't regard that as much as the Darwin one where we had 4. Yeah, 4 up there. But yeah, we had like eight teams, and 7 was the most we'd ever travelled with. But yeah, we're all in the top
Yeah,
10. I think only a couple of teams snuck in there.
yeah. Because you'd built up such a great social network as well. You had so many people playing. There was just a lot of teams to train against, which just basically lifted everybody to another level, essentially.
Which is why, how I was going to say, one of the other things that, my lovely stats guys gave me was in 2011, we were the first away nationals where teams from the same state came first and second. It was unheard of, for that to happen.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, uh, Sorry, it did happen in 99 and 2008 where there were more than the one team, but they're both home nationals where first and second went out. So 2011 was that first time that you saw multiple teams from the same state in the final, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
In an interstate
In an
comp.
interstate where you had to travel, which
Yeah,
is always harder, right? And home advantage back then was huge.
yeah. You guys literally did everything first except for get the trifecta. That was, you did everything else first, pretty much.
Damn them, they
Um,
retired too early.
yeah, they did retire too early. Actually, tell them that they should come back. Um, So I wanted to ask you about something. So this has come up. I mean, I guess a lot of states are confronting this at the moment. They're locking in their rosters for the coming nationals at Hobart, and I've just been reflecting this week upon how roster changes are probably one of the most sensitive things that happen within
Yeah.
the local community, and like managing the shift of players from one team to another. Um, yeah, it can be difficult because people have been training together, and you've got friendships all blended in there and all that kind of stuff. Is there anything you can share with us from your experience you think that's like important when it comes to managing,
I'm going to
you know,
reflect on
movement of players?
yeah, so I'm going to reflect on a story here, and Rogue may kill me later. Rogue is probably the most loyal of my combat wombats to me, and he stayed with me for a very much longer time after the others had branched out and created their own teams. And he stayed with me for a long time. Now, that boy held to me 1 year longer than he should have. He was offered the spot on the Jets in 2014, and yet because he had made a commitment to me, he didn't even have the conversation with me. Had he had the conversation with me, I would have released him. Because I was at that point, I really was training Rogue to be a captain, and he was already where he needed to be, and I was ready to let him go and go off and do his own thing and carry on that legacy that Dorky and me started, like the others had, like Psych and Ace and things. So I was ready to let him go well before he realised I was let him go, and I think had he had the open, critical, difficult, awkward conversation, because you got to have the conversation, and normally it's our anxiety and fear about that conversation is actually worse than the conversation itself. Um,
Mm.
and that is always my advice to people: is be upfront. We had a conversation with the Quackening captains this year because we had the Wazzy at the time couldn't make it to Nats due to school, and there was some so we had to potentially make, and we did make a roster change, which we've now made another roster change because circumstances have changed. But we went to Quackening even though we hadn't firmly decided we had a preference order on who we wanted as our six to replace Wazzy. One of those was Stinky, and he was on Quackening. So he was our second choice, Drake being our first. So we went and had that open conversation with the senior guys on that team and said, look, we'll work with you. We don't want to destroy your team and things like that because we think it's critical, but this is what we're thinking and this is what we're looking at and this is why we're looking at
Mm.
it. And so we had some back and forth conversations. Now, if it came to that, then Quackening was going to go to their team and have the conversation, but because it was an open conversation, they were going to be okay with it. But they also then started looking at, well, what do we want to do and who do we want to replace and what options does that leave? And we talked about that as two teams together. We had that conversation. So if you lost Stinky, what would that look like? And who would you think to pick up and who's going to fit that chemistry?
Yeah.
And that would have, had that eventuated for Stinky that Ewan was unable to commit to us. And Stinky had come to Orcas and he got that level up, and that's how Quackening saw it. They had options, they had thoughts, and we just didn't dump it on them. And it wasn't like we were saying, this is now your problem, not an us problem. Well, let's talk about it together. What do we think is going to fit you guys?
Yeah, that communication piece is like just critical when it comes to it, isn't it? It's like, yeah, we've had a lot of movements happening locally here, like every state has of late, and yeah, it's we're learning as we go because we're doing the selection panel thing for the first time this year, and we're like really green when it comes to like, okay, how do we do this in a way where we can like, we've got to try and like honor our performance spots. We've got to try and give ourselves the best chance of performing to maintain as many spots as possible at nationals, but we also want to take care of our players and make sure that people feel like they're getting a fair go. And like you said, if we do have to make a change because it's fair for a player to be invited into a higher team, most teams would be like, okay, then you take that opportunity, kind of thing. Yeah, but how do you do that in a supportive way so that the team that might be losing a good player, you're working with them to help them fill the spot or get the training they need to manage the change in their roster, and give them the support they need to still be able to compete as they were expecting to with that player on their team. So yeah, I think we feel like we've navigated through it pretty well, but obviously always refinements and improvements. But it's been the communication, like all the players and the captains, like checking in with each other before they approach players and things like that. That's been the key. That's probably the reason it's worked okay, is because everybody's felt part of the process along the way.
There's nothing worse than getting blindsided. It feels like shadow games, or I described it on the weekend during our AGM as Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
Um, I've
yeah.
been on the receiving
What
end.
happens in Game of Thrones? Lots of people die.
I've been on the receiving end of Game of Thrones. I've also been the
Yeah.
team that's been the feeder to the top team, see Wank and
Mm,
losing Sark and Damo. Um,
mm,
and it wasn't always handled well, and we always had to move
mm,
past it. And the one thing that I can advise everyone, and even the player themselves, trust me, your fears inside are worse than how the end of the conversation goes. It might start rough, not going to promise you it
yeah,
won't, because feelings
yeah.
get hurt. You bond as a team, and
Mm,
it's a real thing. Um, People just get hurt, and that's natural. That means you meant something to them, and I don't. And you got to acknowledge that. You got to acknowledge all of those things, but then you also need to be happy for the player moving on. I know everyone's probably sitting there going, "It's all right for you at the moment because you're the 18," but I've had it happen to me,
mm,
where I've had to let my children go, and that's okay. I did very badly handle Silas, Ixak, and Damo, but as a person, I learned a lot from Captain Oz and that about having that open conversation about all of those things, and then Jake bringing us back into the back into the car park where they acknowledged how they made us feel and how they did it and how they went about it, because it was all very sneaky, and how that was wrong. And then we tried not to do that to each other going forward ever again, if that makes sense. It was that
yeah.
honor
So you got a
code.
chance to clear the space and start again, so to speak. So
Yeah.
even though you didn't quite manage it great the first time, at least you were able to clear it after that and go, okay, well, we learned from that. We'll do it differently next time.
And I think that was probably one of the biggest lessons tags ever taught me, is own my part in it. I know, yeah, I'm
Mm,
human. I don't always react the best. I don't always make the best
mm,
decisions.
mm,
And I don't always do the right thing, you know. But at some point, when you've got good friends, like Beefy is one of my good friends that loves to point out to me, Simmy, come on, bit of overreaction there. Dorky, very key to the success of Combat Wombats for keeping me in line. Um, Nick and Hybrid now, Rogue. Um, we all keep each other in check. And those relationships and honest relationships are good because I'm then able, as myself, to go, well, I did the wrong thing here, and how am I going to be part of the solution rather than the problem and drag it right out? And I certainly try to fill that role for other people around Zeltec, and that's not going to surprise some of you that are watching this because you know I've had these conversations with you about owning what you did. It's okay to make a mistake. It's how we evolve. It's what we learn when we do these things, and then when that situation arises again in your future, not doing it again. And I think that was a valuable lesson and something I'm very thankful. It was very much the Doug mantra. It's okay to
mm,
make a mistake, and it's okay to get it wrong. Just be honest
mm.
about it.
Yeah, well, they say that your ability to succeed is actually directly linked to your ability to make mistakes and move on from it. So yeah, making mistakes part of your success, really, isn't it?
Mm.
I wanted to close out with something. To finish up. I wanted to talk about clicks. Clicks. Um,
Yes.
yeah, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can be a thing that happens in communities where you kind of got little groups that all hang out together
Yep.
and they don't interact much. Um, I mean, it can function okay for a while. What's your kind of position on clicks and what's the long term impact of having them?
Okay, so clicks eventually rise, whether the clicks are aware of it or not. You get people sitting on the outside that feel anxious and depressed because they're not one of them. And then they're going to go start doing all sorts of crazy things to get your attention, right? Or they're going to start doing all of these, and we've seen it many, many times. Or they just disappear and you don't quite understand why. And you're hurting their feelings without clicks don't always necessarily, it's not intentional, right, to keep to yourselves um, and not be open. But you have that negative impact on somebody. You don't know how they're feeling when they go home and everything else. Your direct behavior of that click thing is pretty much putting a barrier up and saying, no, you're not welcome. And that can be, thinking of the age of our players, can be very daunting, can be very overwhelming, and it can be really sad because laser tag does attract those players that are slightly more socially awkward and that. And laser tag, at least that was my experience, is a place where we feel we're comfortable. There's more people out there that are into these nerdy things like Stargate and laser tag and all the things that I'm into, and it gives you a sense of home and security when you're in that. But it's very hard, it's very easy. It's the one man dancing thing. If anyone's seen it, Positive Motion, this little man dancing all by himself.
Love it. Yeah.
And then somebody else comes. Then somebody else comes. They don't know why he's dancing by himself, but it's that positive motion thing. And then somebody else comes. That is a positive thing, and it can be a negative thing because the one man dancing on his own can also have a negative impact because that can also turn into a click. And then those watching are too frightened to join in. So it's always good to have those close relationships and have those tight moments. I think that's healthy, especially for a team, because you need to bond yourselves. But you also need to have events where you open it up and everyone is included. And that's the best way to navigate around it. Certainly something we're trying to work on at home at the moment is, hey, apparently some people are going to come watch me. I've been secretly training down at the park on my cardio with my gun. So some people are going to join me tomorrow for my cardio apparently, and some people are going to apparently bring popcorn to watch the crazy lady in the park. But the invite's gone out to everybody, and the invite that I've sent out, we've got hikes going on Sundays, organised by Hybrid. And that invite's not just an AUKUS thing. That's now we've decided we need to bond with the rest of our community, and the best way to have these conversations about strats and help these guys, because now the new team cap process means, hey, we can earn more spots if we could just get you into the top 16. But the best way to build those trusting relationships where the advice is taken is to have those moments that aren't just laser tag. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's my take.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody, but I'm trying.
No, it's good. And I kind of, my experience of it's been that, it's trying to get a league or a scene going is all about retention, right? Like you got to get people in, but you got to retain people. And I remember back in the day before we had any stream or any real organization at all, retention was so hard to keep people because you're trying to convince people that it's a valid way to spend their discretionary time and money to be running around in a room shooting lasers at each other. The clicks are like it's a tricky one, right? Because you want everybody to bond, but there's a point where if there's a closed group of people bonding, there's going to be people that aren't in the click, right? It's the people that aren't in the click that you worry about that could potentially go, oh, I'm not really feeling like I'm a part of this, and then you lose people, and then it impacts the retention.
Or you
Right?
end up with two conflicting groups is the other impact that may have. That's the one you want to avoid as well. Not just the retention, but you don't want two groups of people that if they just bothered to have a conversation have more in common than they knew.
Yeah. So there comes that communication piece, hey, just opening it up. And I love what you guys are doing by having the social events outside of laser tag, inviting all the new players along. I think that's just such a critical part of it. And yeah, we got a Taipan here in Queensland. He's our guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the heart and soul of the place at the moment, and just particularly down in Brisbane, I guess, in terms of managing all the social outings and stuff like that. So I've got a lot to thank Mr. Taipan for in that area. Do you think, just to finish it off, mate, have you got any? What are your thoughts about our culture at a national level? Do you think how are we going at that level? Is there anything that you see that is working, not working?
Look, I think most of mine's what I'm probably, and I think I posted this on the ref, on one of Moomin's posts, is about refing, where everything we are and who we are is based on our experiences, our conscious bias, our unconscious bias, and this also goes back to the click thing, is being aware of that. Everyone has conscious bias, unconscious bias, which is, I know I'm biased in this section. And then there's the one that you don't know that you are. And everything that makes those elements happen is based on your experience. And everyone's at different levels. Everyone's journey is very different. So you need to not always, because how you feel in that moment when you got the term, you truly believe, and I don't believe anyone truly cheats. I know you all think and tell me all the time this person just does it on purpose. But I think if you have an open conversation, they don't. And neither does a ref mean to miss it. And we all need to be aware of that. I do feel like we've made a good direction in supporting our referees, but there's still no more work to go there with the officials and that. No one's out to stuff you around, guys, but sometimes you need to slow down and go, well, what's influencing my reaction right now? Because I'm personally invested. My adrenaline is way through the roof. I really want this, and I'm committed and passionate, and that's what makes me a great player. But by that same token, that's motivating your unconscious biasness, whether you know it or not. You're already so cemented in your decision that you need to take a step back. Have that breather for 10 minutes. Think about it. Think about what's influencing your decision and everything else. And could you just got it wrong? Because what you feel and your experiences aren't what the refs are, or aren't what the tournament coordinators are, or your teammates around you. Just because you're mad, he got that wrong, he stuffed it up. You're under adrenaline, and adrenaline can play silly buggers with you until it cools off. So that I think every person, I think that's how you evolve, and all of those things. And I know I sound like a bit of a fruity cardboard box right now, but I've had some experiences in the last couple of years that have really made me more conscious of my unconscious biasness, and things like that, and how they motivate my decisions. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's bad. And it's okay to take a 5-minute breather to understand before I go flying off the handle as Simmy does and grumping at you all going, it doesn't hurt me just to take that 5-minute break. I'm just as guilty as the rest of everybody else, and I think that's important. But I don't mean to upset anyone, and I don't think anyone truly means to upset them. It's close and personal, and the things we do when things are close and personal and we really want it are very different to how we do when we don't care, if that makes sense.
Well, that's why we love the sport so much, right? We get to like fully shine super bright, and then sometimes, like screw it up completely and have opportunities to refine character. Let's leave it at that. But,
certainly been my experience.
This is what competitive sport and working with community over time and all that kind of stuff gives you the opportunity to do, right? It gets you get to discover parts of yourself that might be undiscovered otherwise. So
it is exciting.
All positive in the end. Yeah. Well, mate, thanks so much for jumping on tonight. Really appreciate coming on for a chat. We could talk about this kind of stuff for a long time because there's so many little topics we could drill into a lot further, but I really appreciate you coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully you might come on and share more of your wisdom and history with us sometime.
Absolutely no worries at all. According to Stinky, I'm from the 16th century, so I've seen a lot of history.
I've seen more than that, mate. Keep going back, Stinky. Keep going back.
Don't tell him that. He doesn't need encouragement.
Okay, mate. Till next time. Peace out, everybody. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.